Okay, we're going to get started here. So this is the narrative game development panel. I am going to introduce our panelists, and if you are in the back and can't see, you can move up. There are some chairs. Odo will be moderating, because I know these people too well. At the far end, we have Andrew Plotkin, also known as Belford in the MIST community, also known as Zarf in the interactive fiction community. He is well known in the IF community, having made a bevy of games in the IF format, including the semi-recently completed Hayden Lands. If you were at Mysterium 2013, you probably saw his presentation on Seltani, which is a text-based multiplayer MIST universe game. And he brought a celery root, which is apparently slightly rotted.
Yeah, sorry.
Celery root.
It's a kind of... It's a space celeriac.
Yes. In the middle, we have Ichiro Lamb, who is not paying attention.
I am totally paying attention. I was reading the end of the source code of his game.
Is that a published version of the source code?
That was one of the Kickstarter rewards.
Oh.
Come up and look at it afterwards.
Can I spoil it for everybody? It says HL debug ends here.
Ichiro is the president and janitor of Dejabon Games. You may remember Dejabon Games from the free Steam code in your badge. If you didn't get a free Steam code in your badge because we ran out and there were too many people, let me know and I will work something out. Earlier this year, Ichiro has been designing and developing games of all types for over 75 years. Earlier this year, Dejabon launched Elegy for a Dead World, which is the game you get for free, which is a game about writing and reading fiction while exploring dead civilizations. Prior to that, Dejabon also released Monster Loves You, which is an interactive visual novel that allows you to live the life of a monster, and you can become a brain surgeon or destroy humanity and all that good stuff. In the ancient past of the 90s, he worked on Assorted Muds, which stands for Multi-User Dungeon, which was sort of the text-based precursor to modern MMOs. And here we have Dean O'Donnell, who did not bring Fennel with him. He's an assistant teaching professor in the interactive media and game development major at Worcester Polytechnic Institute. One of his focuses is on storytelling games. You also do theater?
I don't do theater anymore.
Oh, he does not do theater anymore. The best way to describe Dean, I think, is from one of his freshman courses where students do everything from improv acting to playing and writing Dungeons and Dragons campaigns and then design and run a small alternate reality game. He's also a novelist, a playwright, and a screenwriter, according to the bio he has online. And I will now hand it off to Odo.
Good afternoon.
Hi.
Hi.
Do we? Yes.
You have to hold your
Okay, I'm going to start at the top. How do you give the player a place to create a story?
See, that was actually, I wanted to run the whole panel on that question. I think we could probably do that.
We could.
I wrote that down because here we are looking at, so you're looking at Elegy in a Dead World. Who here has actually tried Elegy? Not you. Elegy is a game in which you literally write narrative. You type, that's all you do in the game. You walk across and you type things and create a piece of text and other people look at it. And then I worked on Seltani, which is essentially a MUD. It's a text version of Myst Online, which is also a game in which all you do is walk around and then create worlds by typing in text. And these are completely different approaches to giving people a place to to make story out. And that was as far as I got before I got tired and had to go to sleep. So how would you compare those?
Let me take it this way. I think that every single person here, every single human being, and also some animals are storytellers. We tell stories every single day when we talk to friends about what we've been doing in our day. We write online. It could be something on Imager where you have an image and you have a little tiny thing going on underneath it. I could give every person here a blank piece of paper and say, go write something, and every person would come up with something interesting. It might not be, Shakespeare, but it would be something new, and it would be something different for every person. It's interesting also that I think we co-create with each other, and it's great when we give each other frameworks with which to write. So has anybody here written any Myst fanfic? Show of hands. Okay, right. I mean, that's great because you were given a framework and you took that and you moved it somewhere. So if you haven't played Elegy for a Dead World, we actually do that. We give you a framework. It's a very, very simple one. We start you off with a little bit of a poem, and then we say, what do you do with this? And so to answer Andrew's question, what is our way of doing it? We basically start you off with something, and then you create within that space, and so you have that spark of information, and then you run with it.
Yes. Isn't it great to have a panel that all agrees with each other? One of the things that we're constantly trying to do, or that I'm constantly trying to do with my students, is to write less. Okay, I'll lean. One of the first things I write really big up on the blackboard is brevity, because filling in the blanks is what your players are there to do, and if you don't give them any blanks, then they're reading a novel. But even novels give you blanks to fill in. You're making those pictures. You're informing those characters with motivations that may not be on the page. So when we're making games, especially kind of live action games or online games, the trick is to give just the framework and not fill in all the blanks. Let the players create, and because the stuff you come up with as a player is much more interesting to you than whatever I came up with.
That was 221 words.
I haven't even gotten started.
The other comparison I wanted to make, actually, and this was unwritten, I wanted to have Ellery or Blade here to talk about it, but they're not here. Unwritten, of course, is a paper and pencil role-playing game, which is also on the subject of, well, we're going to get a bunch of people together, and they're all going to co-create a story with yet a different approach. And I haven't actually played it, but I watched the session yesterday, which was very interesting. The fate system is all about, rather than saying, old style role-playing games, the player suggests an action and the game system says yes or no to it. And this is, as we know in improv, not a great way to proceed. The fate system is built around giving the player gives a suggestion, and then the system says yes or complication. And then that gives the story a chance to go off and do something weird. Sprain your ankle, or bring down the wrath of the gods, or whatever.
Well, the one thing that game systems can do is raise stakes or throw in monkey wrenches. So if I say to two people, I call two people at random up out of the audience, and I say, you don't like you, and go.
Can we do that?
Oh, it's not going to go well, because most people try to lower the dramatic tension. You don't want to fight. You want to get along with each other. You want to make friends. But drama and story comes out of conflict. So games can do that by adding a mechanism to raise conflict, to say, okay, if I give you the black die, then you fail. at whatever you do. I'm quoting Fiasco at this point. So that I can make you have conflict, because generally the reason why improvisational theater groups rehearse is to get good at raising the stakes, to get good at the simple rules of improvisational theater, because our natural inclinations are to settle conflict, to solve things. It's the other kind of wonderful things about games is, at least while we're playing the game, what we do doesn't matter. So I can throw my own monkey wrench if I'm of that ilk. So lots of people will, as long as they feel comfortable, say, "No, I don't like you," or "Yes, I killed your puppy." Yeah.
Okay, let me put it this way. Question, mechanically speaking, or maybe narratively speaking, isn't all conflict a result of a limited number of resources? And therefore, if you were to put you and you together in a room and say conflict, you would say only one of you gets to come out alive.
Sure.
You can phrase it in terms of resources, but it's conflicts of interest. It's when two people want contradictory things, which is just the definition of conflict.
Right.
That was boring.
Well, but then we get into character.
Yeah.
And so we can
Is that
always,
what people want?
what do you want, right? It's the old Babylon 5 questions. Who are you and what do you want?
And is there any, what is the third? Is there anything for, why are you here? Do you have any, oh, sweet.
And why is your finger so long?
We have found our people.
Was there a question of that when you walked in? You're like, I wonder if we're at the right place, because there's like a Chinese wedding going on in the other room. Was that you?
Let's ask those questions over there, see what happens.
That question? No, don't apologize.
We just went off. We bloviated.
Terrific. Do that some more. How do puzzles fit in with story design?
We just had that. Like, that was what Rand was talking about.
Really?
Yeah.
Can I say something that may get me kicked out of the room? I actually don't like puzzles. What I like are obstacles and tools. So in the game that we're working on right now, which is about, it's an RPG about interstellar exploration, you go down to planets and you have a situation set up and you have a number of obstacles. For instance, you're trying to get into, I don't know, sort of like a space station. How do you get into it? Well, in a puzzle game, perfectly okay. You find the red key card and you put it into the red key slot. Whereas what appeals to my thinking more is problem solving, where I want to get into this, and if I'm a human being, I'm probably going to want to get in a non-destructive way. But if I have a robot and I'm using that as an avatar, well, who cares about the atmosphere? Blast my way in and evacuate the thing. To bring it back to the initial point is that, do you have to have puzzles? Can you combine narrative and obstacles?
Sure. There are a lot of classic puzzle games which turn out to be systematic. Sorry, I thought I was being loud. One of the things that I wanted to do in my game, this is a very classically puzzle-based game, feel free to read while I'm talking, is it gives you lots and lots of different alchemical spells to work with and lots of different situations, and you spend the bulk of the time in the game just applying things to other things to see what the rules of the universe are. And that is, an expansion is something which is very familiar. Now what? Oh. I'm supposed to also sketch the people in the front row while I'm... So that's an expansion of something which is familiar in all sorts of puzzle games. Like even the older, simpler ones work by presenting a set of rules in the universe and expecting the player to think inside them. It's not as far removed from what you're talking about. But if you develop it all the way off in that direction, you wind up with a roguelike style game, adventure game, rather than a puzzle style adventure game. These are merely ends on a continuum.
I do a lot of work with alternate reality games. I don't know. Do you know what alternate reality games are? Okay, they're like real life Myst. You're all playing one this weekend, right? One of the things, one of the greatest hangouts for alternate reality games is a forum called unfiction.com. As part of one of my classes, all my students make tiny little alternate reality games that last 4 or 5 days. And they're always terrified that all these expert puzzle solvers from Unfiction will come in and wreck their game, right? They'll just speed through everything in an hour and a half. And the truth is, everybody on Unfiction is all like, I don't know how to solve puzzles. I'm really not good at puzzles, which is why I come to the forum, because I hope somebody else will solve it. I don't think... I'm not sure anybody loves puzzles. People love solving puzzles, right?
Some of us actually do love puzzles.
Okay.
Honestly and sincerely.
I love having solved a puzzle. I love that. Oh, I got it. Oh my God. If you've given the people the tools to solve your puzzle, then it shouldn't be an obstacle. Am I saying that correctly?
I'm not sure what that means.
Well, so I'm constant. One really hard puzzle will stop everything until that puzzle is solved. Five puzzles that start brain dead easy and work up to hard, that teach you how to solve that hard puzzle, will give you 5 little, I got it. Yeah. And that's the feeling you want, is I got, rather than that 5 hours of sitting there going, I don't know.
Sometimes you put in an easy puzzle and you know it's going to be easy, and you know the players are going to look at it and think about it and get right through it, but it's still a story beat. Puzzles in adventure games, puzzles are what provide pacing. In a novel, you could put in a long, slow passage, but people, when they're playing a game, the screen, the situation they're in is paced by what the player does. So all of your pacing is based on making the player slow down and think and look around. So in the largest sense, a puzzle is just a pacing mechanism, and every pacing mechanism in the game, even picking up a key and putting it in a lock right there, is a puzzle. Of course, you can't judge how good players are at solving things, so there really are puzzles that will stop everybody for 3 weeks. There was a time when that was seen as a positive thing in the game. Back when there were like 5 games. Yeah, back in the 20th century when we were all 15 years old. Apologies to those of you who are currently 15 years old. I know it's different now. So it's tricky, and that's why game design is hard.
So we've interviewed a bunch of the Infocom guys, and over and over they say that everyone hated mazes.
Can I tell a maze story?
Sure.
All right. How many people have played, interactive fiction, Infocom type games, or MUDs? Okay, so a fair number. How many of you love mazes? Oh, geez. All right, so we used to do one in the early 90s called Legends of Future Past. It was a commercial MUD based sort of... Oh, wait. Yes? Sweet! Who did you play?
Basically, every time I played, I chose something different.
Oh, interesting. Well, we probably know each other. I used to be a GM for it. Anyway, everybody hated mazes because we used to run these weekly quests, and the filler of adventure games in that era were mazes. And so we had this one maze where everybody was experienced and knew how to do mazes. You go into the first room and you drop a gold coin, and you go into the second room and you drop 2 silver coins, you go to et cetera, et cetera. And so this group of 16 adventurers was conferring with each other, and they were like, my God, why did the GMs do this to us? But all right, fine, we're going to do this. And they were talking for 20 minutes about their strategies for solving the room. And they finally got it down, and they walked into the first room. They dropped a coin. They walked into the second room, and it said, hey, wasn't that easy? You're done. That's my kind of puzzle.
It's true that mazes were the filler of adventure games, but even in the first adventure game, there's a variation. Like there's a maze, and then there's another maze that works differently, and you have to notice that it's different and think about it differently. I kind of like mazes because people have come up with really creative ways to make them different and do different things, like we recall from Myst.
Sure. I don't want to shit. Sorry, I don't want to poop on all mazes. There are many good ones.
There are many other kinds of filler puzzles too. Like, what year was it that we swore off the 15 puzzle as an adventure game staple? Like the sliding thingies.
Oh yeah. Elliot made one of those for a game at school. I seem to recall. Well,
did he actually just leave?
He left. He's gone. He says, it's in good hands.
Anyway, we don't have to talk about the bad stuff. What was your... No, I had some other point and I've forgotten what it was. Damn it.
Sorry.
There is a... I have to actually, as my Carthago Dolenda est, there's a standard question that comes up in a lot of these about not the conflict between puzzles and story, but the conflict between giving the player freedom and giving the author freedom.
Oh.
I just want to establish that that's a canard. There's no conflict there. Next
Why?
question. Because a game doesn't do only one thing. The player is making a decision about what to do right now, and the player is also thinking about what's going to happen in the next chapter, and the player is also thinking about what's going to happen in the end of the game. And at each of those layers, the player has some freedom and the author has some freedom, and perhaps the player has lots of freedom in the chapter-to-chapter movement and very little freedom about how the game ends, or vice versa. But when the player will always be thinking about the choices that matter to him or her most at the moment, which means that's where the author can sneak in and shape the high-level or low-level course of the game as these things happen in parallel.
Well, so I'll play.
Go ahead. Conflict.
So I get a lot of complaints about Telltale games.
Okay.
That I chose because I have 25 people all go off and play the same game, and then they come back and they find out that I chose to save this person and he chose to save this person, and it didn't matter. Whichever one I chose, they died in the next episode anyway. So, yeah, sorry.
Is that a spoiler? How many
Spoiler
people have played...
for an unnamed game.
Right. All right, here's a question. How many people have played through Season 1 of Walking Dead? Oh, not very many. All right, never mind. Spoilers.
There are zombies. So then the complaint is our choices didn't matter, because no matter what, there's a corpse at the end of that road.
Well, you can watch two different movies where there's a corpse at the end. They're sure as hell not the same movie.
Right. Okay.
Does it matter to you how that person lived or died? If it doesn't, why are you playing that game? Pick a different one. Also, there are games where the level of where there's a significant strain of interactivity solely in what you decide to think about what happened. The same thing happens, but you are a different person because of your attitudes towards it. There are games that take that specifically as the mode of interaction, and that works. It can be made to work. And the Telltale games, which I've actually not played very many of, just because I don't like zombies, the Telltale games do a lot with that because they're all about, well, in the latter series, they're all about character interaction, and saying that the player doesn't care, like saying that the player shouldn't care about all the choices the player just made seems like a very a self-defeating point of view. I think players are much more engaged with what they're doing than that reaction would indicate.
So I'm going to agree with both of you, and I'm going to disagree with both of you. So if you haven't played, what's that?
Sorry, go on.
If you haven't played The Walking Dead, essentially what Dean and Andrew are talking about is the complaint that, oh, I saved you instead of saving you, and yet you ended up dying because that's what we had budget to do. I'm sorry. You're fine now. You're better. And then you ended up surviving because that's what, we had to narrow the plot again. Don't we want to do things that matter?
Yeah.
Right? So that's what Dean's saying. And then what Andrew is saying is, well, yes, but isn't the experience that we went through inherently meaningful? And I would agree with that. However, I think, I guess this is a budgetary thing, right? You can only do so much. And because everybody is raising this as an objection, I cannot believe that we as an industry are not going to overcome that in the next iteration.
Oh,
Well-
people have been having this problem since 1982. There have been a lot of
Yeah.
iterations since
In
then.
1982, 30 people bought games, right? So it's
I
2000.
was one of those. 30
You are,
people.
right, and we are probably the other two. No, the present room. But what I'm saying is that, like, now we have a huge number of people complaining about games giving you a Hobson's choice, and therefore any subsequent game is going to be seen through that, pardon me, lens.
I feel like there's a situation where a certain group of players will play through a game and get two different and see two completely different storylines, and think that, like, okay, that mattered. I changed the outcome of the story, and then they both discover there's an epilogue scene which is static, and like everyone sees the same epilogue scene, and they say, "Damn it, I was wrong. Everything I cared about, I didn't really care about it because my outcome stopped mattering." And if your view of the game can be changed that much by an epilogue, I'm going to blaspheme and say you're playing it wrong. That's a blasphemy because it's the stupidest thing that the game designer can ever say. Yeah, I mean, Jesus.
Yeah. Well, so my response is that plot isn't all that there is to a story. That changing what happens is maybe impossible in certain situations, right? But changing the kind of person you are in those circumstances, those are the choices you can make, right? Yeah.
But don't you want the kind of person you are to have enabled you to have the ability to change the story? Isn't that part of the reason you go in and do those? Because you want your personal choices to be able to influence.
In some kinds of stories. I mean, The Walking Dead is a zombie story. It's about the futility of people flailing against this evil that is going to destroy them. Spoiler, at the end, evil is going to destroy you. And I understand that's not all games are going to be like that, nor should they be. But getting back to what I was saying earlier,
Okay.
there are short-term and long-term consequences, and both can be interesting.
Sure. Oh, there's a question.
I have another question, kind of related to the same thing. Kind of bring it back to you guys being the developers and the writers.
Yeah.
How much do you really, when you start out with this story, how much do you really write for you, saying I have this great point I want to get at? How much do you consider the player satisfaction of what they want? Have you done it on?
Well, I mean, look, I run a small business, and therefore it has to be both. I have to do something that's artistically interesting to myself, and yet I always draw a Venn diagram in a talk. And so here's the circle of everything that I'm interested in, and then here's the circle of everything that would interest you. Why can't I just write about the intersection between the two?
Where is that? I mean,
Well, it's going to be different for every game, right? So, sorry, go ahead.
I'm in academia, so I get paid whether anybody plays or not.
I'm in interactive fiction, so I don't get paid no matter what. That's not completely true, but I'm running on a smaller scale, and also my budget is lower. That's the great thing about text games, is that you really can write a lot more endings for the same lunch money than someone with a 3D modeler can do. Which is why there's so much experimentation in interactive fiction. The comparison to the Telltale games are the choice of games, like Choice of the Dragon, Choice of the Deathless, and so forth, which are text-based choose-your-own-adventure games where you go through and do a lot of sort of development of your character. Typically, you'll see the same set of chapters. Like you have short-term choices. You have a choice of something to do in every scene. You can do several different things. Medium term, there's a sequence of chapters, and you're probably going to see all of them in the same order. Long term, the ending of the game splays out, and your character sees some different life resolution based on all of the sum total of all the things you do. That's a great example of short term versus long term. But that's a game that one person can write because there is only text in it. Lucky. I have not written one of those kinds of games specifically, but it's in the crowd of things that I do.
Well, if we go back to what's considered branching stories, so here's a choice: do you go left or do you go right? And if I go left, the entire world changes. It's an entirely different story.
Yeah, well, that's the simplification of it.
Right. So. Long term, that is each choice you make in a game, you want to make a lot of choices, right? So if every time a player makes a choice, you get a completely different game, it becomes unwieldy very quickly. 10 choices are 100 different games, right? So,
1,024.
Wait, what?
Okay. 1,024. Okay.
Wait, what?
Math?
Well, that's assuming a binary choice each time.
That's the
That
simplest.
would be a boring game.
Right.
I want to be able to have a third choice
A
each
third
time.
choice.
It's 3 to the 10.
Oh my God.
Well, there you go.
Yes. No, that's okay. So we have all these workarounds for branching stories, whether it's collapsing an entire branch back, whether it's we go down one path, but then for whatever reason we get back to everything gets the epilogue kind of stuff.
Or condensing different areas of choice into different regions so that you've got several different worlds, as in the Myst games.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I don't know.
You're running this show, man.
Well, we're not letting him run this show.
We're bloviating.
Dean, you had made a point before we started about telling stories through architecture, letting the environment tell the story. Is that correct?
Yes.
How does the push and pull work there?
Okay, so I work with level design a lot too. And so we ask some basic questions about any space that you're going to design and whether that space is actually built in 3 dimensions and in the Unreal Engine it's beautiful and everything, or whether it's a paragraph description. There are certain questions that you want to ask and answer. So what was this place built for? What is it used for now? And how did it get that way? How did it change? So, I mean, this space itself, it was built for this, right? I think. It's a conference room at a hotel. So that story isn't very long or very interesting, right? I don't know.
There's probably a long and story to this building. There's actually a painting outside with 2 white dudes sort of like looking like, here's my blueprint, and here's my, I don't know what the other dude is. Maybe it's like a pet or something.
I did not see that. See, You have to notice your surroundings.
I explored.
I did not.
It's actually true that this hotel was refurbished over the past few years. Like, this is the swanky new version of the hotel.
Huh.
It's nice.
Yeah. So how old is this hotel?
I have no idea. Probably, like, the building probably goes back to the who the hell knows? Do I look like I'm...
Okay, the 70s. I don't
Probably
know.
had 70s. Here, so bring it back to Myst. I think isn't the main character of Myst the architecture?
Yes.
You know, the layout of the buildings, the artifacts, the industrial design, the people who pop up on screens, and they're not here interacting with you. It's sort of like a dynamic, static thing.
Well, that's also the wonderful thing of where did everybody go? That's the basic question of the original Myst, I think. Is
Sure,
Who
I mean-
am I? Where am I? Where did everybody else
Atris
go?
pops as a character because we've seen all of the stuff that he made to live in, and we think, oh, that's a person we could hang out with. Look at all the books. Yeah, no, I'm a big fan of environmental storytelling. It's a well understood. Like, the first console game that I played was Soul Reaver, which is an action adventure game. You whack a lot of vampires with a big sword, but they did a surprisingly good job of putting in architectural storytelling and the history of this decaying world, which is being overrun with vampires over the course of 500,000 years.
Well, that whole thing is what our Elegy for a Dead World is about. A colleague and I, to create that game, sat down for an afternoon, and we were like, what is game development like, or what did we think it was going to be like when we were 10? And so we sat down in the kitchen of our co-working space, and we got multicolored pencils out and paper, and we got it's based on the works of British Romance-era poets, so we took poems and we said, let's make side-scrolling environments based on them. And so this building is like this, and it represents hubris, and this other thing represents, we're at the center of the world, and this represents, et cetera, et cetera. And I think game devs are at their best when they do that. They let the architecture tell a coherent story, and then they overlay things over that.
But it goes back to what you originally said, which is provide the framework and let the players fill in the rest.
That's also a cheap way of doing a game, because then you can not do the game. You can have the players write it for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Play Elegy.
I mean, certainly there's a lot. Much of what makes Myst is not having to spend a lot of time with the actors on screen, because that was expensive. Video was expensive. I don't think architecture is the only way to do this sort of thing. You don't have to start with that. But it's been a shortcut which has been used in lots and lots of well-known games.
Well, I started reading a whole bunch of architecture books because I realized I didn't know anything about architecture, and I needed to know something about architecture. And one of the amazing things I discovered is architects think of themselves as the first interactive media purveyors. That architecture itself is the first interactive media.
Yeah, I once picked up an architecture book, not that I've studied it, but I picked up this up and flipped it open, and there was an exercise in the back, like, okay, design a garden from the terms of the experience of somebody who is walking into it and sitting down. And I immediately thought, oh, there I am. Like, there's my viewpoint in designing things.
They talk about what is the rhythm of a space. Can the doorways set up a rhythm so that, or pillars, bump, 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 and then if you've got a long stretch, that's a rest. So architecture itself can be musical, which is mind-boggling to me.
And that's kind of why Abduction is taking a while to come out, right? I mean, they can't say, well, we're gonna finish this in X number of months, because they don't know what the music's gonna sound like, the architectural music.
Maybe.
Oh. I'm trying to help them out here.
Oh.
Of course, it's harder in text because you can only spend so many paragraphs being rhapsodical about the pillars before the players say, get on.
Yeah.
But, you do what you can.
question about storytelling games being used in K-12 and higher education to teach about reading and writing specifically. How is that best applied?
You're the academic man.
Okay.
What are some examples? How's that?
There's this game called Elegy for a Dead World.
Okay, sure. So we are in about 200 plus schools, and we have received some feedback from, this is universities, K through 12, small classes, home schooling folks. And I guess, with our game, we wanted to, it's a consumer-facing game. It's not an academia, it's not an educational game first. So what we really wanted to do in the edu sector was to get people to realize that they can be creative, because we are all creative, and yet I'm gonna poop on your whole thing.
Poop away.
Academia kind of teaches us to be boring, right? Answer these questions. No, I'm serious, right? I mean, where is the creativity on the SAT, right? I mean, you could fill in the bubbles. You could probably burn the test, and you won't make your way into college. But
The academics that I know, no offense, no, the academics that I know actually in the interactive fiction field spend a lot of time on criticism, and constructive criticism is really, really interesting. I have written reviews of games. There's a lot of the creative process that comes out of that part of the cycle.
Sure, so I absolutely agree with you. But when you think about third grade,
Well, I don't think about that.
well, maybe you should. But when you think about third grade writing class or English class, do you think about all these worlds that I created, or do you think about where to put the semicolon?
My problem was that public school didn't teach me to write. I didn't start doing that until I was in college and motivating myself because I wanted to write interesting puzzle games. So I can't speak to the public school experience of writing.
So one of the things, so I've done a bit of teaching of younger kids as well. Back in a prior life when I was a playwright, I worked with kids in Boston. They would, it was a program called the Tremont Street Project, where basically they would hook up a professional playwright with an 11-year-old, not that kind of hookup, and together they would write a play. And essentially, our job as professional playwrights at this point was to ask questions and write things down, because we're really good at writing things down. And 11-year-olds are amazingly good at making things up. So the hard part is this blank page, right? That it's got to be good to put on the page. It's got to be good enough to write down. Basically everything I've ever written pretty much sucks when I start. But I write it anyway because I am full of hubris. And I somehow believe that people will enjoy the things that I write. And that kind of confidence is the first step. So getting somebody to put something down is the hardest part, getting your butt in the seat to make something. So I, in my writing class, I pair everybody up, and one person writes and the other person talks, because it's a lot easier to tell a story than it is to write a story, right? Let the other guy write it, and then we switch. And you write the second half of the story while I tell it. And amazing stuff comes out of that. it's the old imposter syndrome. Somebody at some point is going to tap me on the shoulder and tell me I know nothing, that everything I've been saying is crap, and I am horrible at what I do, right? We all feel this to greater or lesser extents, right?
Yes.
I think you're dreamy.
But if you can put that away, if you can say, I'll just fake it, right? I'll fake it for a while and see what happens. And nobody taps you on the shoulder. And it's been like 20-some years that nobody has tapped me on the shoulder.
And the great thing in game design is all the other writers in game design are crap too. I mean, look at some of these games out there. I want to. I wish my friend Brendan were here. He is someone who has actually used interactive fiction pieces in elementary school and high school just as a school activity or like an extracurricular activity. Get kids in, sit them down, have them play a text game. Mm-hmm. It goes really well. I've been involved in doing this in crowds of people at Boston Fig. Go to Boston Fig, by the way.
What is Boston Fig, Andrew?
The Boston Festival of Independent Games coming up in mid-September at MIT. We do a thing where we project a text game on the screen, and like someone's up there with the keyboard and says, "All right, what do you want to do?" And everyone in the audience stares at the screen and like, someone says, "Is this one of those games where you go north?" And the player you type "go north" and something happens, and the audience gets into it very quickly. Mm-hmm. You can do this with kids. They catch on quickly. I started playing these games when I was 10. And they maneuver through and are very engaged. It's not a writing process, but it is a active engagement with the story and expression of will.
So going back to the original question, I'm hearing that the answer, K through 12, how do you get people to be creative, is to expose them to creativity.
Because it's creativity that gets things created.
How do you use games to tell stories with universal appeal?
Nothing has universal appeal.
I have no
Whose
idea.
question was that? Who wrote that?
Who wrote that?
Elliot?
All writing is about genre, and all genre is about achieving greater back and forth with your audience. Audiences are self-selecting. That means more of the people who want to read or play that come in and sit down and get engaged. And the people who aren't interested in that, they're in some other room. Good for them.
Or how about approaching the lowest common denominator, which sounds like a bad thing, but it's not necessary. Like Harry Potter, a lot of people like Harry Potter, and I think it's actually good and fun. So how to get everybody universal?
I mean, that's just asking how do you write something which is really good. An interesting question, but not one with a simple answer.
Well, it goes back to your question. I think it was yours. How much are you writing for yourself, and how much are you writing for this imaginary other person? In the end, you've got to think that your own stuff is good. So in the end, you're kind of always writing for yourself. I think. I am.
I kind of want to follow.
Sure.
Please.
Shoot on that. But like, if you have like this story idea, how do you? And I'm sure it's different for each genre text versus regular gameplay, but the architecture is supposed to be very, very slow initially. So how soon do you guys feel like you have to poke the person in, or give them a little bit of the overall problem or the story, and spend some of that drama currency in the beginning, or do you know how do you play that out? You know what I'm talking about?
So I'm going to disagree with Andrew immediately because I played Hadean Lands and I backed it back in the Kickstarter days, and it lost me because it didn't have universal appeal. Right? So it.
How do you write for the slime monsters of Prius 4?
Well, I mean, this is a game where I did try to hook my players immediately.
Yeah.
The way I did that was I give you a puzzle which is about, alchemical reactions and, trying to figure out how all these things work and putting them together. If you're the kind of person who's going to want to play this game, that will hook you immediately. If you're not, maybe it won't.
Yeah, so I mean that's not a criticism on your game so much as that I'm a different type of gamer.
Yeah.
Well, but you want to say what your
You absolutely want to
your
hook the
thing
player.
is as quickly as
Yeah,
possible.
you want to hook the player right away, and you want to you want the entire work to have some level of continuity. So hopefully you're hooking them with the way the game is, the way what's going to come.
Right. The idea that 15 hours in, this game gets really good.
That doesn't work.
Yeah, I'm out. I'm
If you
out
start
on-
playing Myst and you're someone who's really, really interested in dialogue, the opening is not going to hook you. Neither is the rest of the game. Sorry, I saw a hand in back.
Yeah, how do you, when you're working with others in your field, do you find it difficult because some of you may have such conflicting ideas, like one person may want to make the player do this, and the other may want the player to go back, or a third may want it to just fall off that cliff or whatever?
You're the one who's actually worked with other people.
All right, so the question was essentially when you're working collaboratively as part of a team, how do you handle the fact that writers especially are like herding cats, right? I would have two things to say about that, and I'll give examples based on how I work. First and foremost, there can be exactly one lead, right? And that's me. In certain cases, obviously, it's other people in other cases. But the way that we develop storyline, narrative, and adventures is in an iterative say it 3 times fast, approach. So one person will come up with a story, and that will be a bare bones outline of a story, and it will be based on the backstory that we've created for the entire game. And then the second person will take that first person's story and then take a pass on it. They will iterate on that, and they'll say, I like these pieces about it, I don't like these other pieces about it, and why don't you extend these this way? And then the third person will come in, and they'll understand what those first two people are doing with it, and they'll extend and expand and so forth. And we do this sort of round robin thing, and assuming that you have the right team, because if you have the wrong team, this never works, assuming that you have the right team, this is a very wonderful additive process where the first person's vision tends to shine through and is made better by the second and third person. And by the end of it, there's no, no, I wanted it this way. Everybody sort of has ownership of it and wants it to succeed, and therefore it does.
I have only worked solo, but from what you're describing is the same way a bunch of writers would work on a television show or on a novel if you have a collaborative novel. It's going to go back and forth and iterate, and if they can't agree, then it doesn't happen, or someone has to get fired. It's not so much typically with a novel. It really is a consensus process, but I'm sure in a television or a movie process, somebody winds up with the responsibility of saying, okay, the decision is made.
So I've worked at a number of places before I taught, back when I was a playwright and needed money. And one of the things that always seemed to happen was it's much easier to change words in a Word document than it is to rebuild graphics or change gameplay. So a lot of times things would get changed story-wise because there was a technical limitation, or I had one where an entire quest had to change because we'd been outside too much up to that point in the game, and the level designer said we want to be inside.
Wait, is this one of your alternate reality games where people actually had to go outside?
No. This is a game called Titan Quest.
Oh, yeah.
Which I did some writing for, and so it was this wonderful quest that was Orpheus and Eurydice retold. It was amazing, and they said no, Orpheus can't go back up. He's got to stay in the underworld because we've been up twice now. So rewrite that quest. Go ahead. So I did. And the reward as the writer is, okay, I love working with limitations. That's how poetry gets formed, right? That's what can I put on a stage that'll work on a stage. That's where my creativity comes from, is my constraints.
What kind of puzzle can I write that will actually be solvable?
Yeah. So when they tell me rewrite this or change this because I can't do outside or I can't do leaves, and your entire plot depended on that. Oh well, okay. How do I do this? And if I'm a good writer, that's where I get my joy, is working within constraints.
And I see you guys are conferring. Are we out of time? Do we have time for one more question? Do you want to kick us out?
Shall we dance?
Can I keep just saying things and like, sorry.
It's
No,
terrific.
I'm going to.
No, it's. Elliot?
Talking as long as you want.
No, look, I'd rather leave on a high note than have everybody be like, wow, these clowns spoke for an hour and a half, and they were just like.
Okay.
So basically, we're basically at time, but if any of you have final thoughts on anything,
Oh, yeah, well, wow.
final brief thoughts on anything?
Pretend to be what you want to be, and eventually you'll be that thing. Batman.
Kill your parents. Don't kill your parents.
Responsible for any deaths.
Yes. Upcoming dates: the Boston Festival of Independent Games in September. There is a MIT Interactive Fiction meetup that gets together every month. You can ask me about. There are other interactive fiction meetups in places like Seattle and San Francisco and London. If you happen to be visiting any of those places, I don't know when the Book of Marim is coming out.
Okay, so I guess I do have something to say. You know, if you guys have any questions for us and you want to email us, I'm sure Elliot and company will give you our info. And Boston is blessed in part because we do have a thriving game development scene. So if anybody is interested in going into game dev or is just interested in it, then you're in the right place.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now we can leave.
That was dress rehearsal.
You want to leave?
Can we?
I mean, you can, I suppose. Or you could just sit here, whatever. So, thanks for coming. Have you even played Mystachiro?
I may have.
Oh.
Actually, it's my wife who's
His
the
wife
Right.
has played.
I'm the.
You've read the books, right? Yeah.
Wow, way to make me feel like a jerk.
It was a panel of industry professionals, not a panel of Mystplay. So coming up at 5 o'clock is the next Escape the Age session. I will read the list off as we get closer. Meet me in the hall. There's space left in the 9 o'clock one, and the whatever the one before that one is. There's lines left in the next one, but don't sign up for it because the more people there are, the harder it gets, so you don't want to. Other than that, there's another unwritten session at 7:30, and beyond that, it's socialization and having fun.
Yay.